Kia ora koutou and welcome to this lunch and learn that we've got today with fabulous Jack, who's here to talk to us all about open banking. I'm very excited. Welcome, Jack.
Kia ora, everybody. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for giving up your time and sharing some interesting insights with us. So, to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your brief potted history leading up to today, really, and then I'll ask you about Volley after that.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, I'm Jack. I'm well, I guess now an ex-software engineer. I still do a little bit of programming, but I've moved away from that side of things. Yeah, and I'm co-founder of Volley. I'll get to that. Um, I've always really enjoyed making things. I've got like an absolute million different hobbies. That's vastly decreasing at the moment, but I've gravitated towards design and then programming. So I got started as a bit of a software engineer, more of a product developer now. That's what I'd call myself. Um, yeah, and then getting started on Volley was really after returning home from COVID. I really wanted to just start doing something different, but so I started trying out a few different things. I worked in the public sector for a bit. I really, really enjoyed that. It was really, really fun. I liked moving into a space where I was working in a team and I was working on services for people. And that just felt really good. I kind of realized I was really tired of code there. And around that time, my friend James also returned home. We just wanted to start working on our own thing. Yeah, so we got involved in this thing called Volley. It was based on this app called Tiki in the Netherlands. And
Right.
yeah, Tiki means tag in Dutch, and
Okay.
it lets you share payment requests with friends, and they can just tap to pay by bank. Um, takes this kind of really traditionally administrative task like pay back your mate, makes it quite enjoyable and keeps it social. Um, I didn't actually think much of the idea, to be honest. At the time, I thought, who cares? I can already pay my mates back. Who gives a toss? But I sort of started talking about this with some other friends, and one friend who had lived in the Netherlands, their eyes just lit up when I explained that we wanted to do this in New Zealand. So I thought, oh, hang on, maybe there's something to this. And then when you actually talk to people, a lot of people actually do want this service. The consumers are demanding it. They want a bit of a Venmo here in New Zealand. So we got started on it. Put together a few slides and started working on the project and built a bit of code. And then before you know it, we had access to an open banking API, and we haven't really looked back since then.
So tell us a little bit more about Volley and what problem you're trying to solve, because I know that's evolved from just paying back your mates, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely grown back from getting paid back from your friends, and it's sort of turned into this idea where I'm wanting to make payments really easy and accessible in every situation. So if you actually look at payments as they are today, making a payment isn't really streamlined at all. You paying a friend is different from paying online with a card or paying another person or a bill or a government agency or a parking ticket. There are all these sort
Mm.
of different ways of being able to pay. It's quite a fragmented space as it is currently. So what I really want to do is make it easy for anyone in Aotearoa to both make a payment and start accepting payments using the same payment method for anything. So whether it's a friend or a business, we want that experience to be really accessible, safe, and simple. Um, yeah, so if you think about it, like some payments today are harder than others. They're quite a bit of
Mm.
administrative pain. Like you can grab an invoice number, then you got to find an account number, you got to check the payee details, and it's just a hassle. And so when you think about it, that really small bit of pain, it actually adds up a lot across the entire economy. So what I'm ultimately wanting to do is really increase the velocity of payments by having a payment method that works for every context. Um, and as I've sort of thought about this and developed the idea, it ends up becoming more of a piece of infrastructure that improves this flow of payments in Aotearoa, while also putting competitive pressure on existing payment systems. So for us, the way that we do that with Volley is we have the Volley app. which is on the App Store. Volley Pay, anybody can look that up. Yeah, so that's for iOS at the moment. Android's coming soon. And then for not-for-profits and businesses, we have a dashboard for acceptance. And then for enterprises, we have a platform API and a software development kit for deeper integrations. It's ultimately about really transforming payments from this mundane, error-prone process into something that's actually delightful to use. So
I love the ambition of delightful for making
it should
payments.
be. It's like if you think about the interactions you have with your friends, you go on a trip together or you organize something for another friend.
Yeah.
That's a social interaction, and then it quickly moves into this bookkeeping exercise with a friend, and it really shouldn't be. So with the app, you can create a payment request. It's just an amount and a message, and then you can share that with a friend. They don't need the app either. They just view, and then they select their bank, and then they're redirected to authorize the payment, and that's it. So it's actually this really intuitive experience that just helps what you're already doing become easier. And so this also, once you've got that experience sorted between friends, the same payment method actually works across all sorts of situations: bills,
Yeah.
invoices, parking
Well,
tickets, right?
yeah, I was just thinking about our septic tank pump failed recently, and in a single day, I needed to pay the electrician, the plumber, the people that came and pumped out the septic tank, the person that had to come and cut some concrete. I had to pay all of these people, and it is a faff doing every
It
single
adds
one.
up.
Yeah, yeah.
It adds up, and if you think about like the really painful ones, my canonical example is always when I get a park, well, not that I get them often, but if I get a parking ticket, firstly, it's a really annoying and frustrating situation, but it's made even more annoying and frustrating that I tend to grab it, put it in the glove box, and I'll leave it there for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Then I'll grab it. Then I'll have to go to the big machine because I'm a millennial and I can't do things on my phone. I need the big machine to make a payment, and I'll get the ticket, and I have to enter in the number, and then I have to make the payment, and then I also have to get charged with a card fee at the other end of it, which is super annoying. So I think that process could actually be a heck of a lot easier. And if you think about it on the receiving end, the person receives the funds a lot quicker if I'm actually going to make the payment on time. So it's the same for all sorts of small businesses. I think that it could be really, really helpful in those contexts.
So all of this leads to being possible because of open banking. And so my next question is a two-parter. What drew you to the open banking space? And then you've told me that open banking creates fantastic opportunities for new businesses to emerge. So can you tell us a bit about that, your interest and where you see the possibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I never ever thought that I'd be working in banking of all places. I always thought finance was like really dry. And I've actually really come around on it because the way I've thought about it is like the financial system is actually a really, really core piece to the economy and like growing wealth and improving things for everybody. And the more accessible that can be, the better that is for everybody. So that's what open banking sort of philosophically is all about. It's about opening up these traditionally walled gardens to other people. And I was kind of bought into it through my co-founder James. He worked at a neobank in the UK called Monzo as an engineer, and he was working on open banking APIs, which we use for checking a person's finances for a loan. And so we'd worked on a few things before, particularly PowerSwitch, and so we were good friends, and we basically took this idea and then talked to people in the industry, and just slowly got more and more involved. And we realized, yeah, we could actually build this, and then talking to the banks themselves, who were actually generally enthusiastic. So
Oh,
so that
cool.
was like a good starting point. So like big shout out to BNZ and Westpac as well. They were like really, really enthusiastic and just kept us engaged the whole way very early on. Um, so on that sort of opportunity side, I really do think now's the time to get involved in the space if there's sort of any interest, because open banking has really been one of those things that's been simmering away in the background for a long time, but it's actually here. The regulation has come in this year, and it's giving a lot more confidence to the market, and so I think we'll see a lot more growth. The banks are really opening up. The accreditation schemes are coming through MB, and we're actually moving money with these APIs, which at the time when we first did that was absolutely like mind blowing. I couldn't, the dollar moved. Oh my God, it's quite amazing. And then we're actually now starting to connect up to access customers' accounts with their permission, of course, so that we can read data about the customer and then use that to improve what we're building. So I think in terms of like opportunities,
Mhm.
the opportunities lie in that fintechs that are like really fast moving, that they're nimble technology companies, and they can really put emphasis um, on the consumer, or it's like a customer centric model. Um, anybody that can spot a weakness that traditional banks aren't covering, that the banks do a really good job of securing your money, but they don't do a really good job of customer experience. And that's just due to the fact that they're this huge institution. Their development cycles are really slow. And so there's actually this kind of like symbiosis between the institutions and the fintechs. And by opening up their systems, third parties can then innovate for the bank's customers. So broadly speaking, there's kind of like some big opportunities to improve experiences for people. Obvious one, payments. Huge opportunity there to transform the way that payments are processed and the way that people make payments. You're moving from a customer having to enter information to just having to authorize your consent to give a payment. And then, so there's a load in there. And then on the other side of the equation, we've got account information. So that's having access to customers' accounts. The obvious one is for making loan applications faster and more secure.
Right.
But there's some other ones that are really cool, and you can just look at Aussie for personalized financial management, and improving like financial inclusion, because you actually know what your position is, what's coming in and what's going out, what's my financial health, that type
Hmm.
of thing. I think there's a bit of opportunity there. There'll be the chance to have financial product comparison, so between the banks. So a little bit like Power Switch, but it'll be bank switch. It won't switch for you. And I feel like this is a real confusion with open banking, that um, you know, the Prime Minister says, oh, open banking is going to make switching banks easier. No, that's slightly incorrect. Open banking will make it easier to compare financial products, but the actual switching process is a whole different thing. It's outside the scope of open banking. And then further down the track, I think we'll start seeing automated services for businesses. So you think about the finances of a business, the funds that come in and go out, they often need like a team of people. I think that this will get a bit more streamlined because we'll have the API capability to move money around. And I think, combining that with some really smart tech, there'll be a few things coming out of there. A bit more fuzzy, I don't really know, but it's
No, it's good.
exciting to see.
Yeah, it's good to stem the kind of the conversation and let people start to think about where the possibilities
Yeah.
are. There's some great questions coming on the Q&A, and for anyone else who's watching and you have questions for Jack, please pose them. But before I jump to them, I'm going to ask you one more thing about the big banks.
Mhm.
So they, as you've mentioned, they've traditionally dominated the financial systems, and you talked about the backbone of the country, which is really important, and especially where consumers are concerned, we've had limited options. How do you see this changing in the new world of open banking?
Yeah, it's the banks really hold like a lot of information about their customers, and that relationship between customer, institution, and data has actually really changed in Aotearoa recently. It's kind of been under the radar, but there's this thing called the consumer data right, And if anyone's interested, the bill's called the Customer Product and Data Bill.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so confusing, eh? But it
it's
talks
quite
all about this
confusing.
consumer data right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, a really exciting thing, bit of a segue, but a really exciting thing about it is it's actually just started in ones. You'll notice there's nothing that says banking in in that
Yeah.
legislation. Um, it's banking's the first sector, but we're going to be able to do this for all the other sectors: energy,
And they're
insurance,
talking
health.
about energy, aren't they, as being the next after banking, which for consumers, that'll have a huge impact as well.
Totally, yeah. Because if you think about as an individual, I just have to interact with a bunch of institutions, the government included. I have to have, you know, I have to have power running to the house, and so I have an account with that power company. And so, what the consumer data right is about is putting giving you the right to have access to your data. Um, you interact with these institutions every day. It produces a lot of data. These institutions hold that data. Um, the idea is about unlocking it by giving consumers the right to access it and then share it with whom they want to share with. And so, in the banking context, I've already alluded to, it's the first one's account information. You want access to your account information, then you're actually able to do payments, which is another form of data because you're saying you want to move this from this side of the ledger to this one. It's just the same thing. And there's a lot of power in that. So it makes sense to run with banking first. That's really critical to all the sectors.
Yeah.
But as far as like consumers are concerned, um, I think a lot of innovations from smaller fintechs will start coming to market and start acquiring consumer usage. And this, you know, it's all built on top of that banking infrastructure. But what the fintechs can do is that they're able to develop and create interfaces far quicker than a bank, and they can meet those consumer demands. You know, I'm sure we had the internet, and then how long did it take before we had internet banking? Probably a little bit of time because the banks are just inherently not able to move as quickly as other technology companies. Um, but you know, I see more competition between the banking products as those comparison tools become available. But I also just don't see consumers moving their funds away from traditional banks. So I think it's a really stable area to work in. People tend to stick with the bank that they're with. But having said that, behaviors may shift towards giving third parties permission to interact with their financial information. So perhaps there'll be a bit of a shift to neobanks, and that could in turn provide a bit more competition within the banking sector. So I think you've got this a bit of a relationship between neobank and fintech on top of open banking. Um, but what I do believe fundamentally is that we'll start seeing better services that are customer focused, layered over traditional banking. Um, I kind of see it like the bank becoming a complex and secure database
Right.
that authorized participants can interact with on behalf of a bank's customer. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, I'm going to jump to some of these great questions that
Oh,
we're
cool.
getting. Ross agrees improving making payments is very cool. He'd like to know, will it be easier to verify a bank account electronically instead of having to provide a deposit slip or other proof of account documentation?
Yes, that will be much easier. With the Volley app, we in fact do this when you sign up. Um, so at the moment, we just have BNZ and ASB that you're able to connect your bank account with to Volley, and we use that to verify your ownership. Because if you think about it, um, you're on your phone, you have your mobile banking app. We just ask you to go to your banking app, and then it's clicked authorize, and then we get the information. So it tells us who you are. That at the moment is only for personal accounts, but that probably will be quickly expanded into business accounts as well.
Nice. Good answer. Thank you. Okay, Nathan's got a far more complex question. He's responsible for payment connectors for the business he works with. He says it's really fragmented, but from his experience, PCI and AML compliance are the two big hairy gorillas in the room. And he's wondering whether open banking and these changes are going to help start to address and make them easier and reduce development costs, for example.
That is a curly one. I'd have to know the details. Off the top of my head, I would probably say probably not. For PCI, open banking is strictly account to account payments. So
Hmm.
it's if you think about the card network, it's complete. It's separated from the banks. The banks are involved, but it's Visa, Mastercard, and whatnot, and it's actually credit that's moving across the system. Whereas open banking is about enabling direct account to account transfers. So slightly different. Um, we actually don't have to do AML under our current use case because we don't actually hold money. We just issue commands to the bank, and then the customer goes to the bank to authorize that command. That's how it works. And so the money doesn't actually funnel through us. So it does actually make those sort of requirements a little bit easier.
Mm, mm.
I hope that helps a little bit. If that's a completely
I,
waffly answer, email me.
I'm sure I can, yeah, I can connect you with Nathan after this webinar to have a deeper conversation. The next question's from Mark, and he is asking about with Volley, was there much of a barrier to entry to get access to open banking APIs? And with regards to cost and learning curve, is there a reason that you went down the path that you've gone down?
Really good question. Barrier to entry. I'd say it wasn't purposeful barriers to entry, but it was certainly the open banking scheme in New Zealand has been industry led, and it's meant that it's required a lot of corralling to get, there's not really much point in one bank having APIs. Like you're going to provide that service to just the customers of that bank. You need all of them, so you need a lot of coverage. Um, and it's taken a little bit of time to get there because banks have a lot of compliance that they have to deal with. They have a lot of things on their plate. Like it's actually not, if the money might seem like an infinite resource, but there's only so many people, and it takes people to build these networks and get it up to speed. And it also takes people to create the operational side of the equation. There's the technical, and then there's the operational where they can actually check who we are as a business, and we have to get through that. So there are a lot of barriers, but those barriers are getting easier and more streamlined day by day. I'm part of a working group called the Accreditation and Partnering Working Group, and a lot of that work will be sort of passed over to MB or the API Center to handle accreditation. And rather than being, we've been doing this for a while, we had to go and talk to each bank individually and reach agreements with each bank. That process is going to change to a multilateral situation where you have one engagement with the accreditation scheme,
Mm.
and then you can get connected. That's what it will move to. It's not quite there
And
yet.
and MB will administer that
Yeah,
or
MB
just
MB
oversee it?
probably oversee it. So this is being decided at the moment,
Hmm.
how that structure will work. And the barriers are quite high. I think going into it, typical startup, you don't know what you don't know until you get going. Um, Sort of the simple answer would be you probably need to be ISO 27001 compliant. You need a good use case. That be restrictive, but um, it's heading towards, yeah, you just meet these criteria and then you've got access. That's what it's doing at the moment. But the learning curve has been somewhat high, I would say. The cost has been somewhat high, but also not completely prohibitive. Um, if we were to do it all again, I'm sure we could do it in half the price for sure. But we've been doing this for a while, and it requires, insurance, penetration testing, yeah, all sorts of different things that you don't expect. But
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that is interested in connecting, because it's the kind of information that we want this to be public, because let's develop a thriving ecosystem here. It's not about lock-in, it's about opening it up.
I love that. I love that attitude. So you've just opened the door talking about ISO because you and I are
Mm.
connected over discussing standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of follow up still to come on those discussions. How important are technical standards and interoperability for companies like your own, especially for growth and in a on a global export market?
Yeah, so the technical standards for us are just hugely important. I'm sitting here. James, my co-founder, has just sent me a pull request, and that's to connect to another bank. Um, and that's just a bit of configuration change because we adhere to the standard, and so the standards at the bank are the same. The APIs are the same across all the deck. So yeah, it allows us to have a baseline where we can do things in a really structured and safe, and really importantly, a contractual manner. So we can issue a command on behalf of the customer, move money, set up a recurring payment, or share their data. And just to emphasize on the contractual part, it's really important because that allows us to have our liabilities determined ahead of time, because it's an API, but it's also a contract. So those standards are really, really important for upholding the integrity of the network. It's important that consumers who are um, unfamiliar with open banking can continue to trust the institutions and use these services. So those standards, they create a set of rules. Those are both technical and operational and experiential. And they are based on those international best practices for achieving a system that's usable for fintechs. It's supported by banks, and really, really importantly, it's safe for consumers. So the standards really enable participants
Mm.
to innovate within a framework that is safe. And I think it's really important, especially for the growth of the industry, because it's just absolutely got to be trusted. And in terms of export, I'm a little bit less certain around the possibilities for export. But if we look to standards usage in the UK and the EU, there's definitely a reasonable level of interoperability in different jurisdictions. So I have seen growth occur outside of one particular jurisdiction, because if you think about fintech, it's often highly tied to the state's currency. Um, but that open banking interoperability, it's pretty close between like the UK, Oz, and New Zealand, and globally. It's not just the the English speaking nations. I saw the other day that Nigeria just announced their open banking suite,
Nice.
and so it's really cool to see that it's actually becoming a bit more of a global network. And I think in some ways, I'm like, where's this movement coming from? And I can see it as a little bit of uh, the banks need to do this to survive in this modern environment where you've got fintechs that are coming in really fast.
So, talking about these other jurisdictions, are there any that you're jealous of that they've got way better regs and legislation, or any that New Zealand should be looking to adapt our ledge and regulations
Yeah,
towards?
yeah, yeah. I think we often look at the UK. So
Hmm.
within the API Centre, that's the industry body for developing the open banking standards. We often look to the UK and Oz, but a little bit of a different take. I actually think we're going to leapfrog those jurisdictions. I think that we've actually taken a really smart approach here by really focusing in on payments a little bit more over account information, that's what happened in Aussie, because there's a lot more value that we can unlock for everyday Kiwis. And I think that the regulators have got it right. There's still a little bit more work to do. It's getting there, but I do kind of firmly believe that we're actually going to leapfrog at least the UK in terms of things like recurring payments. They're called enduring payment consents, but you can call it repeat payments or recurring payments, whatever. Um, the UK actually is still working towards getting that released, whereas in New Zealand, um, those APIs will be readily available from the top four banks at the end of the month.
Right. Wow.
That,
So
so it's
soon.
yeah, so it's so soon,
Excited.
but yeah, I think there's some I think what's really special here in New Zealand is that we're quite small, and it makes sort of collaboration a lot easier. If you look at the UK, I think the minimum number of banks they had were, I think it was 8 or 9 when open banking got started. Here it's 4, and I have relationships with people within those banks, and that's really useful and helpful because everybody's aiming towards the same thing. So I think that we do have a real chance to lead the way, not just in open banking, but why don't we do the same in the energy sector immediately?
Mm,
That work
mm.
can get started, and then why not the same and sort of I would love to see open government one day. That would be really cool.
Oh, there are open government people, I'm sure, are listening to this who will be excited to hear you saying that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. Now I'm going to jump back to the
Hmm.
Q&A because there's lots of good questions. Um, One question from Alan, who's curious about how what you're doing is different from what companies like Xero and Pocketsmith have already been doing in accessing banking accounts.
Yeah, for sure. So they're over. I'm not sure how Xero's bank access works. It's probably over some contractual bank feeds, um, and they're kind of a different kettle of fish. They're like a much larger organization, and they're doing it, but it's their access probably isn't open to small fintechs like ourselves, right? So the difference here, and so Pocketsmith, they will be using it's called non-standards access, or the simple way to think of it is you give your bank access, your password to Pocketsmith, and they can log into your bank, and then they can web scrape that information and then provide a nice overview for you. So that sort of usage is probably one of the bigger drivers of where open banking has actually come from, because there is clearly a consumer demand for access to financial information. So, it's not a big, it's a no-no against the terms, but it's been a driver for the industry, particularly from the UK, which we've adopted over here. Whereas the open banking APIs are strictly, they're secure, um, they're authorized by the customer, and the bank knows that they're authorized by the customer, and they can be revoked. Whereas if you're giving a third party access with your password, you might delete that access token, but you don't know if it's been deleted. There's no reference to it within your banking app. Whereas in the open banking scheme, you can go to set up a regularly occurring payment to, say, a charity. Say you want to do $10 a month to Canteen. I can set that up. That's great. And then later on, I'm having a bit of a tough time. I just want to put a pause on that consent. I can do that. Or I get a pay bump. I can increase it. So it's just making things a bit more visible, a bit safer. Yeah, yeah. That's pretty much it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob's asking about money movement and whether you're seeing or forecast seeing on interchange margins at the various levels, consumer, merchant, credit card, etc. Are you seeing any protectionism or defences at keeping the commercial status quo?
Yeah. I think that in some ways it might not be seen as a threat just yet.
Okay.
It's only just reaching the market. But yeah, that sort of interchange um, protection from the card scheme, at least my experiences with the institutions is, yeah, great, let's do this. If you think about a bank, they're probably a bit of a multi-headed hydra of different departments. And the open banking ones are really keen to get this out there. They're not thinking about, oh, what about our interchange margins? Not as far as I can tell, but I'm not, I'm not that close to the card networks or how they operate. But yeah,
Yeah,
it'll
they will see it as a threat at some stage, surely. So, yeah.
yeah, at some stage, I think it becomes a bit of a threat, because all of a sudden you have an alternative that you can offer in your payment gateway, um, as opposed to accepting cards. And even just the option just decreases the usage. And I do believe, we talk about the banks, we talk about the supermarkets, these sort of big duopolies, but we don't even really notice the fact that yeah, you've got one terminal sitting at every shop, and they're only accepting Visa, MasterCard. So it'd be cool to see some different opportunities down that line. I don't think we'll see
Yeah.
it. I don't think we'll see it anytime soon regarding retail. Or we possibly could, but it's a hard space, the retail point of sale. Um, but I can see open banking payments getting integrated into areas where it's a pain because it's an account number. Any area
Yeah,
that
that's
fits
right.
that, I think we can do something cool there, and then it can grow from there.
We have a couple of security questions. So Flash has asked a multi-headed question. I'm just going to paraphrase. How does this change financial security vulnerabilities beyond removing data entry errors in the bank's recent partial checks on account names? How does this improve the financial security situation?
So I'll give you a practical example. So kind of within our system, you log in to Volley, and then you sign up through your bank, and so we can set your account number on. You make a payment request, you share it with a friend. It's got your account number and your account name. So for me, it would be like J.K. Callister. And then we can verify that because we know we got that information from your bank. You can't change that; it's immutable. So you can't sort of spoof it or be like, um, I can't set up an account and say that I'm Richie McCaw, and then it's just an account number. It means nothing, but it's my one, so I can't disconnect the two. Um, so it kind of is confirmation of payee in reverse. So it just gives you a bit more confidence that you know who you're paying because you can see it on our service, you can see the account name, and then when you do authorize a payment, you're actually taken to your banking app where you again see the payee's name, and so you get two chances to check it. So I think it's a bit more secure. Um, it's currently people will send requests for payment, and it's called authorized push payment because someone will log into their bank and then just push payments, and that's where confirmation of payee. So it's kind of auxiliary to that. I think it's a pretty well designed system. It's been in practice in the UK for a long time. We've been able to learn a lot from that, and yeah, we're building our systems as robust as possible to protect consumers because it's like the most important thing to us.
Cool. I'm just going to do two more questions from the Q&A and then I'll ask you my last question because I'm conscious of time. This is amazing. And I will, for everyone, I will send all the other questions through to Jack so he can give me some answers that I
Yeah,
can
happy
pass
to.
on.
Yeah.
So says, I'm excited by the specific use case of your company and what you're pursuing. I'm also interested in how open banking could play with customers interacting directly with their bank. For example, will it let me automate the process of downloading my recent transaction data into a budgeting or similar app?
Absolutely. I mean, nail on the head. That's exactly what you'll be able to do. It may take a little while for your banking, for your budgeting app to integrate. So, you do have to go through a third party, unfortunately. You cannot just set up your own API with your own bank account. You'll have to go through an intermediary. But that type of technology is what's coming down. Yeah. So it will really, really help in terms of like financial budgeting apps and wealth management, things like that.
Cool. And then Chris from Monica is asking, what kind of banking transactions are supported in these new APIs other than account to account? Does it include refunds, callbacks? Are there other kinds of transactions?
Um, Callbacks, is that chargebacks?
I
Is
assume that's what he
Yeah,
means, yeah.
yeah. So it's actually yeah, because there's a really, really good paper by TrueLayer I highly recommend. Off the top of my head, it's page 15. Actually goes into details about it's called the Pay by Bank 2025 report. Page 15 talks about chargebacks in particular. Because this is a different payment rail, it's not developed on credit, and so chargebacks are just not applicable in this case. The and that's also why payments are able to be much cheaper, because it is just it's you are doing a direct credit as
Yeah.
the fundamental payment instrument underneath it all. Then that's what you can that's all you can set up as a direct credit. So it's a single domestic payment consent and a enduring payment consent, which is giving, say, us the ability to go, okay, cool, you want to spend up to $500, let's say up to $300 to your power company every month, and then just automate that. We can just issue that payment without needing another consent, because it's an enduring consent, which can be managed by the customer. But yeah, to answer the question, the only payment underneath it is a direct credit. Chargebacks are not applicable. Page 15 on that thing. And what was the other part that I'm missing? Refunds. Yeah, refunds are not part of the specification. That'll probably be developed individually by each third party that is offering merchant acceptance services.
All right.
But it's certainly possible, because you can read the account number on both sides and then just manage refunds that way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this. I did have one last question for you, not to do with open banking, but if there's any other people out here who are thinking about starting their startup, what's one piece of advice you'd give someone who was going to take the leap and start a startup?
For me, what's been really helpful is like finding the mission and what I'm working on. I didn't expect to be doing something that's such big, chunky work. And so many times, the uncertainty can be really overwhelming. And that can make you feel really, really terrible. So for myself, I kind of find a little bit of solace in the fact that what we're doing is trying to improve the system for everybody. Even if that's just moving the dial like a really tiny bit, it's across a lot of people, and that's like really, really important. So that really drives that mission really helps drive me. And the other piece of advice, and everybody says this, do not quit your day job like too early. Startups are inherently uncertain. And for myself, I find uncertainty is like a massive driver of anxiety. And so it's not even about the job, it's just keeping that stability while you explore uncertainty and become a bit more comfortable with it. That would be the advice I would give myself.
That's brilliant, right? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. If people want to get hold of you, they can find you via volley.nz. Is that right?
Yeah, Jack at volley.nz, or
Perfect.
hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Yeah,
Jack
follow our
Callister.
page,
Yep.
check it out. Yeah. And
Hey,
yeah,
thanks so much for sharing such great, insightful information. Thanks to everyone who joined. I hope you all have fabulous rest of your days, and also ka kite.
thank you.